The Battle of Berlin, full English translation. On April 16, three Soviet fronts launched what would become the most important battle of the 20th century. A battle that ended with the fall of Berlin and the capitulation of Germany. In this video, we will look at the Battle of Berlin from the German perspective and try to understand how Hitler planned to encircle two Soviet fronts, why the city's defense failed, and what happened to the Germans afterward. Retreat and collapse, winter 1945. By the winter of 1945, the war in the territories controlled by Germany had shrunk dramatically. Bulgaria, Romania, and Italy, Germany's former allies, were now fighting against her. By early 1945, Germany's situation deteriorated rapidly, though even worse challenges still lay ahead. On January 12, nearly 2.5 million Red Army soldiers launched an ambitious strategic offensive with the goal of reaching and capturing Berlin by February 1945. The Soviet command underestimated the German forces, but the German units were already severely weakened and could offer little resistance to the renewed Red Army, now reinforced with fresh troops and modern equipment. The offensive turned into a complete catastrophe for Germany. The Vistula-Oder operation nearly became known as the Berlin Operation. Only in February, after prolonged discussions, did Hitler finally transfer reinforcements from the Western Front to the Eastern Front, slowing the Soviet advance at the Oder River. The planned February Battle of Berlin was postponed, but there was little reason for Germany to celebrate. Germany had lost hundreds of thousands of experienced soldiers. Even worse, the Silesian breakthrough by the Red Army forced Hitler and many of his generals to fully concentrate their attention on the east. On March 20th, Hitler officially announced preparations for the Battle of Berlin. German defensive preparations. General Colonel Gotthard Heinrichsey replaced Himmler as commander of Army Group Vistula. Heinrichsey was one of the best defensive tacticians in the Third Reich. Under his command, German forces had previously halted a Soviet advance through the Carpathians into Slovakia. Now he was tasked with organizing the defense of Germany's heartland. Thanks to intelligence, Heinrichsey knew the main Soviet blow would come across the Oder River in the Seelow Heights area along the main east-west highway. He decided not to defend the riverbank itself but to strike from elevated ground. Engineering units and Berlin civilians were mobilized to build fortifications on the Seelow Heights overlooking the Oder. Within a month, 3 defensive belts were constructed, stretching to the outskirts of Berlin, with anti-tank defenses, firing positions, trenches, and bunkers. German engineers also flooded the river plain, already softened by the spring thaw, turning it into a swamp. Berlin was defended by only 3 formations. The 3rd Panzer Army in the north, 9 divisions, none armored. The 9th Army under Bussy on the Seelow Heights, and the 4th Panzer Army in the south. On paper, Germany had about 750,000 soldiers, supported by tanks, 9,000 artillery pieces, and 2,000 aircraft. In reality, these numbers were misleading. Most units were under strength, and fuel shortages severely limited the use of armor and aviation. To compensate for manpower shortages, Nazi propaganda compared the advancing Red Army to Mongol hordes, Huns, and Tatars bent on total destruction. This worked. Tens of thousands joined the Volkssturm. However, fear reached such levels that many who were unwilling to fight chose other paths that cannot be described here. For some Germans, fear was justified. Many were involved in war crimes and knew what awaited them. But Hitler had no intention of sharing their fate. Hitler's illusions. Hitler still believed in the possibility of a separate peace with the Western Allies. Even after the failure of the Ardennes offensive, he could not accept that a stable alliance between capitalists and communists was possible. He hoped British-Soviet disagreements in Greece would break the alliance with Stalin. Hitler did not know that back in 1944, an agreement in Moscow had already placed Greece in the British sphere of influence. New hope appeared after Roosevelt's death. Hitler viewed it as a gift of fate, similar to how the death of Empress Elizabeth had once saved Frederick the Great. But nothing changed. Germany's wonder weapons also failed to alter the outcome. Although advanced weapons had been developed, by the Battle of Berlin they were irrelevant. Factories were destroyed or captured. Stalin, meanwhile, feared that if the Western Allies reached Berlin first, they might not hand it over. Knowing that some Western commanders opposed giving Berlin to the USSR, Stalin decided not to delay. Even before the Second Belarusian Front fully redeployed from eastern Pomerania, the Soviet command began preparations for the Berlin operation. Soviet offensive. The plan involved three fronts. The First Belarusian Front, Zhukov. The First Ukrainian Front, Konyev. The Second Belarusian Front. Zhukov and Konyev were to encircle Berlin, split German forces, and destroy the Ninth Army. The Red Army attacked with 2.5 million soldiers, nearly 6,500 tanks, 7,500 aircraft, and almost 40,000 guns and mortars. Silo Heights and breakthrough. On April 16th, the Red Army launched one of the most powerful artillery barrages in history. In just 30 minutes, 500,000 shells fell on German positions, turning the area into a lunar landscape. Searchlights were used to blind defenders, but fog, smoke, and dust rendered them ineffective, even causing friendly fire incidents. German forces had withdrawn to secondary lines, avoiding the worst of the barrage. The Silo Heights became a serious obstacle, threatening the success of the entire operation. Zhukov committed two guards tank armies, creating chaos due to congestion. Nevertheless, by April 18th, at the cost of heavy losses, Soviet troops broke through the Ninth Army's defenses and captured the Silo Heights, the wall upon which Goebbels claimed the eastern hordes would shatter. Meanwhile, Konyev's First Ukrainian Front achieved a major breakthrough in the south, crossed the Nysa River, smashed German defenses, and turned north toward Berlin. German morale collapsed. Thousands surrendered. Others fled toward the doomed city. General Bussy proposed withdrawing the Ninth Army to Berlin's outskirts, but Hitler rejected it and ordered positions held at all costs, even authorizing executions for retreat. Encirclement of Berlin. On April 20th, Hitler's birthday, Soviet artillery first shelled Berlin. Allied bombers joined in. Water was available only at public facilities, forcing civilians to risk their lives. Nazi leaders fled the city. Göring and Himmler attempted to escape. Himmler even tried to negotiate with the Allies, failed, and later committed suicide. German soldiers had no such options. Desertion or cowardice meant immediate execution. Hitler devised an unrealistic plan to encircle and destroy Soviet fronts, a new Stalingrad. But it was impossible. On April 24th, he finally admitted the war was lost. Storming the city. By April 24th to 25th, Soviet forces fully encircled Berlin. On April 25th, Soviet and American troops met at the Elbe near Torgau. Berlin's defenders numbered only about 100 to 120,000 men with around 60 fuel-starved tanks, facing nearly 500,000 Soviet troops. Despite desperate counterattacks, Soviet forces pushed inward. Fighting raged for every building. By April 29th, only central Berlin remained. On April 30th, Soviet troops stormed the Reichstag, a symbolic heart of the Third Reich. After brutal fighting, the Soviet flag was raised atop the building. That same day, in the Führer bunker, Adolf Hitler committed suicide with Eva Braun. Capitulation. On May 2nd at 6 a.m., Berlin's commander agreed to surrender. In the following days, German forces laid down their weapons. Silence fell over the ruined capital. The Battle of Berlin was over. German losses are estimated at around 400,000 killed and wounded, including 125,000 civilians. Soviet losses were also immense, around 350,000 killed and wounded. What went wrong? At the time of Berlin's fall, Germany still held Norway, Denmark, Courland, and Czechoslovakia, tying down nearly 2.5 million troops on secondary fronts. Evacuating these forces could have significantly strengthened Berlin's defense, possibly prolonging the war. But Germany had lost all industrial regions and raw material supplies. Continued resistance was meaningless. For the Allies, Soviet participation in the war against Japan was crucial, especially with the Battle of Okinawa ongoing and the atomic bomb still untested. Aftermath. Nearly 7 million people across the USSR and Allied nations suffered severe losses. Germany itself lay in ruins. Perhaps the worst fate befell ethnic Germans in Eastern Europe. The international community legalized their expulsion from Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Soviet territories. Tens of millions were displaced. Up to 600,000 died during these expulsions. More than were killed during the Battle of Berlin itself. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave your topics in the comments, and watch how the Soviet Union destroyed Army Group Center in Operation Bagration.